Welcome back to Citizen Development Live. I'm your host, Neil Miller. Today, our guest is Bill Shube. He is the Senior Manager of AMS, Supply Chain Operations, Technology, and Analytics at the Lego Group. Hey, Bill, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Neil. Thanks so much.
It's great to have you. You do a lot. Just give us a quick little background of what type of work you do and how you got to be in this very interesting position.
Yeah, sure. Before I get started, I have just a little bit of fine print, if you don't mind. I'm here on not on behalf of the Lego Group. While I do work there, I'm not here on their behalf. I'm here on my own behalf. I'm also working on starting up my own supply chain analytics consultancy business, Supply Chain Watchtower. So on behalf of that too. But what we'll be talking about here is it's mostly my experience at the Lego Group, and my own opinions.
Excellent. Well, that's a good start. We won't bombard you with little Lego men to come and attack you if you say the wrong thing. So tell us your story. How did you first come into citizen development?
Sure. So I've been with the Lego Group now for over 11 years, always in supply chain analytics. And when I started out, I was one of those guys who would just stuff as much data into an Excel file and write some VBA on it and hope it doesn't break. And you know what happens, right? Those things always break, and it stinks. And I was tired of it. And so back in 2019, I had joined the demand planning team in supply chain operations. And because of my reporting background, I was tasked with developing reporting for us. It was we'd been through some reorganization, and we didn't have a lot of reporting developed specifically for the team. And, so I didn't want to do that Excel route again. And I started poking around, and I landed on, I came across Alteryx, which just kind of changed everything for us. I was able to, in a pretty short amount of time, build out a set of data pipelines that automated ingestion of about a dozen different data sources, transformed it, kind of squashed it all into one place. And pumped it out into Tableau because the data set was too big for Excel, even in the end. In that, like I said, that just changed everything. All of a sudden, we had kind of like a one-stop shop for all of our data needs. And and we were doing minimal data prep. It was mostly just kind of push a few buttons and go get some coffee and wait for the jobs to finish. And so the lead, and then my leadership caught wind of all this and said, well, hey, if you can do this for demand planning, maybe we can try to figure out how we do this for the rest of supply chain operations. That covers, supply planning, demand planning, and then distribution, order management, logistics, that kind of thing. And, we all have data needs, of course. And so, so we kicked off an initiative, kind of a project, basically, to figure out how to make that work, how to make the same thing work for the rest of the organization. And that led to the team that I'm currently on, Supply Chain Operations Tech, which is we're a team of citizen developers. We sit in supply chain operations next to the rest of the business. We are all business users. There's really nobody on our team with coming from a tech background. And, and our role is really a data and analytics support role for the rest of supply chain ops.
So when you made that jump from using Excel to using Alteryx, did it feel different to you, or did you just feel like, oh, I'm doing the same thing, just in an easier way? Would you describe yourself, oh, I became a developer that day, or anything like that?
I didn't realize I was a developer at the time, right? I had never heard the term citizen development. I just knew that what I had stumbled upon was better, right? It was super easy to learn, first of all, and I had a little bit of coding background. I had dabbled in R and Python and SQL, right? So I knew not nearly enough to apply it to my job. That was kind of part of the problem, is that I always wanted to figure out how to apply that to my job, but I was too busy in my job to actually do it. Right. So this, Alteryx just took that barrier away, and it just, it became second nature very quickly. If you asked anyone on my team, once I built that thing, do you want to go back to the old ways? Everyone said no. And I definitely didn't want to go back to Excel. Excel is a fantastic tool, by the way. Like, I'm not an Excel hater, but for this kind of work, I avoid it at all costs now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same is true. Everyone would say like Excel's like, I mean, that's your gateway drug. Like it's a great, it gets
Yes.
you what you need, and then once you realize it can't do everything you want it to do, then you start looking for these other tools. Whether you're into data analytics or you're into trying to build applications or whatever it is you're doing, I think that's a common path we see among a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just maybe to dig into that a little bit more, one thing that I like to highlight, because when you talk to folks in tech, in tech teams, they don't always understand, why these tools are so valuable to us.
Yeah,
I like to kind of call out that, well, from a data analyst perspective in the business, we really just have one. Before citizen development came along, we had one tool, right? That was
yeah,
Excel, and if you were lucky, you knew how to use Microsoft Access. It
yeah,
may, maybe you're unlucky if you know how to use that, but you know, but elsewhere in technology, right? You don't just use SQL, you don't just use Python, right? You've got all kinds of different tools at your disposal, and so like we business analysts need more tools than just Excel too. So
yep.
framing it that way, is I find helpful in kind of getting people to understand why this is something we want.
Let's talk terminology real quick.
Yeah.
Citizen development, I feel like we've talked about this
Yeah.
before. It tends to be a term that after you've been in it for a little bit, it sort of makes sense. Like once you're in the middle of it, you look backwards and it seems to be something that decently describes what's going on, but it's not really something people are looking forward to or are pushing forward to. What's been your experience with that? And specifically, you said you have a team of citizen developers. Do they identify with that term? Is that something that they enjoy, or what do you feel like? Where do you land with the terminology?
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked this, and it was really when we were prepping for this and you posed it the first time, it was a really thought-provoking question for me, because I had just taken the term for granted. When the first time I heard it, I think it was I was joining a governance initiative for citizen development, and one of the someone in leadership called it citizen development. I said to myself, oh yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's what I am, a citizen developer. Fine, but I didn't give it any much more thought, and so I started throwing around the term in my team, and I don't think they've given it any more thought either. Because it for someone who's been doing it, it makes sense, but for someone who hasn't been doing it, and especially for people who are, removed from data work, but who have a need for it. And here I'm thinking of kind of like small-ish, maybe mid-sized businesses, that are growing, that don't have analytics regimes, don't have data people, probably, probably don't even have the resources to bring on a data engineer or an analyst or something like that. You go to someone like that and start talking to them about citizen development, and my guess is they have no clue what you're talking about, and
Right.
that's a shame, because these tools are custom made for organizations like that, right? Organizations where you've got. I actually, as a friend of mine was telling me about his local bike shop. They've got 4 bike shops, in somewhere in Connecticut, I think, and he was talking to the owner. He said, yeah, every week I got to download this, that, and the other from these 4 databases across our different shops, and et cetera. And you know the drill, right? They're
Yeah,
doing
of course.
Excel work. And gosh, like, they could use this, but because they could automate all that work. These guys are spending hours doing it. And, and as a small business owner, you're wearing a ton of hats. Any way that you can offload some kind of your work to a computer is just more time for you to spend doing more value adding stuff. But so I do think there's a need. I have no idea what the term is, but there's a need for a better term that really hits home to people like that, so that they can hear it and say, oh yes, I need that. That would help me.
Yep, absolutely. Well, you use the term governance. Let me jump back into that. Obviously, with the Lego Group, you got a lot of things you're trying to look at and maintain. You got a brand you want to make sure is there all the time. What are some of the governance issues that your organization is discussing around citizen development? Like, how did that conversation get started?
Yeah. So like I said, I was fortunate. I was one of 2 people in the business to get to take part in this governance initiative, specifically geared towards citizen development.
Yep.
It came up actually. It came up from the CIO and his leadership team. So the CIO. So from that perspective, we've got good support here for citizen development. The CIO
Yep.
himself has said
Yep.
point blank, we
Yeah,
should, our platform should include citizen development.
that's great.
But it is great. But the question is, how do we do that? And we're still on step 1 or 2 in that journey. I've been using Alteryx for 5-ish years, but it was technically maybe not really an approved tool. At this point, it's been kind of grandfathered in. But if somebody else goes and asks for a license, they get a big runaround,
Wow.
and it's because we don't have this governance in place. Um, and when this initiative kicked off, I was ready to go in fighting because my assumption was they wanted to just take it away from me.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and it was really eye opening because that actually wasn't their intent, and it really helped me understand citizen development from the perspective of my colleagues in IT. Because, like I said, they're not trying to take it away from me; they're trying to help. They're trying to build an environment that they can actively support.
Yeah.
Right. So, so it's a lot of the, when you ask, what are our concerns right now? It's a lot of the basics. It's ensuring data security, making sure that we're using these tools for proper use cases, and not friends like we're a toy company, right? So we've got apps that children use. So we have a lot of personal identification information on children, and so we've said we're not going to use citizen development on that kind of data, right?
Right.
Because it's super sensitive, and we need to be super careful with it. So issues like that, keeping the platform tidy, for lack of a better term, making sure that we're sunsetting apps that are no longer being used, we're registering them, we're documenting them. We're establishing user communities to disseminate best practices, and to ensure adherence to governance. Governance. And then we're also making sure that citizen developers aren't building things that are too big for them to maintain, so that they don't then just throw it over the fence and say, "Here, this is mission critical, but we can't do it now. IT, it's your problem," right? So
Yeah.
things like that. Like I said, it's really very much focused on just how do we build an environment that is sustainable, that IT can support without us driving them crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you sound like you have a pretty good harmony with the IT team right now, that you can empathize with them. They can see the benefit that these tools are providing to the whole organization. Has it always been like that? Has it been a pretty easy ride in terms of understanding each other, or have there been bumps along the road?
No, not at all. And I don't want to overstate the relationship, because it's much better than it used to be, but there's still some challenges. So when I first started using Alteryx, I was one of a handful of people who were using it at the time. It's just scattered across an organization of 20,000 people. So at first nobody really noticed, and then I'd started getting calls from people in IT, kind of like nosy neighbor kinds of calls. Like, what are you doing with our data? You're doing what? What tool are you using? They didn't understand what I was doing. People like me had never been working with data the way that I was before. And so it didn't, even that just didn't make sense to them. And invariably they walked away kind of realizing that I was not their biggest problem. While I wasn't doing things perfectly, I think everybody else was just downloading stuff to Excel, and that's much less secure than what I was doing. I was using SQL Server. I was behind our firewalls and, all that stuff. So, at the end of the day, they weren't super concerned, but they definitely didn't get it. There's an anecdote I like to tell to illustrate this. It goes back to that data model that I built for my demand planning team, which, as I said, was super successful and really useful. And so one of my colleagues said to me, this is great. You should do a roadshow. You should show other people what you've done. And so I said, okay. And she helped me organize a couple of stops on that tour. She set me up first with a team of demand planners in EMEA, so just my counterparts in the business, and then a team of tech developers who were supporting demand planning. So when I presented to the demand planners within 5 or 10 minutes of my presentation, they were just drooling over what I built. Like their question was, "Can we have this too?" Right? It was just instantly obvious that the value. Um, and so on the next stop to these IT developers, they politely listened to my spiel. And one of the first questions when I was done was, well, Alteryx just writes SQL under the hood. Why didn't you write it in SQL? And I, right, and I was, I, I didn't know what to say. I finally so like, I don't know that much SQL. I can't do this in SQL, right?
Yes.
That's the whole point, is that I can do this without writing SQL. Um, and I still run into that. It's it's much it's much less now, and it's much more about me trying to make sure that. So, like I said, we're trying to kind of figure out what we want to be when we grow up from a citizen development standpoint. And so there's all kinds of initiatives looking at the kinds of tools that they need to onboard to make sure that the functionality that we citizens need is available. And so now it's kind of me being the nosy neighbor, sticking my nose into their business, trying to just point out, that this is the kind of functionality that I need. I need drag and drop ETL. I need to be able to write these kinds of apps, and that kind of thing, because it's not. I'm finding that that's still not super obvious to all of them. And again, we're such a big organization that if I don't if I'm not the squeaky wheel, then it's very easy for them to forget about me.
Sure. Absolutely. So your focus is on data analytics. What do you think are other types of citizen developers you've seen either within the Lego group or outside of it? And then what kind of, like, how do you see somebody and be like, I think this person is a citizen developer. They have this certain skills or personality traits.
Yeah. So, within the Lego group, we do have other pockets of citizen development taking place. In particular, we've got a really strong team of a BI team in manufacturing who's been building all kinds of great stuff with the Power Platform, and that's a combination of analytics with front end apps, to help with scheduling, for instance, right, is an important, and just getting people on the right schedules is an important thing on the shop floor in manufacturing. So there are things like that. There's some folks who are involved in kind of HR, finance kind of support roles who are doing this, and they're working with Alteryx for data analytics, but they're also doing a lot of great work with RPA. They're using Blue Prism for that to automate. We just got so many manual processes. There's so many people spending so much time pushing buttons that they shouldn't have to push, and so so they're doing that kind of thing. There's a lot of really interesting work being done in process mining. I've seen some really, really great work mining our order to cash process, which when I saw it was just blew my mind, because it showed how messy it is and how much work we have, but at least is like a great starting point. So so there's lots of different things that people are doing. And I see a lot of similar stuff outside from what I can tell. In particular, I think there's a lot of app building taking place. People using Bubble, I think, is one that comes up a lot, in Zapier, for this kinds of basic applications and RPA kind of work. As far as the characteristics go, these are first of all, these are people with business backgrounds, of course, right? They know the business really well. They understand their user needs because they're often one of those users. But they're still data savvy and tech savvy enough to, they're not engineers per se, but they're usually the ones who are building those crazy big Excel files right, and learning VBA on the fly just to kind of get their job done. And that actually kind of leads to another characteristic, which is I think an important one, is curiosity, right, and kind of a lack of satisfaction with the status quo, right? Like recognizing that this is, I can see that I'm not doing things as efficiently as possible. I don't know how I could do it more efficiently, but I know there's got to be something out there. So then they're the ones who are going out and finding all these other tools and figuring out how to apply them. Um, and then the last one I like to call out here is process orientation,
Right.
and I think that's a really important one that I think often gets forgotten, because if you've got a bad process, there's no amount of tech that you can throw at it that's gonna fix it, right? You've got to have a sound business process, and then the tech can support it. But if you don't have that, then really the first thing you need to do is get people together who, some of whom understand the tech that's available to support this process, and figure out how to build a process that works and can be executed and repeated without lots of deviation. Otherwise, what happens is, if you don't have that orientation, it's very easy to kind of fall into the trap of, someone saying, "Hey, we've got this, we need you to build this," and if you're not kind of mindful of saying, "Oh, is this a good process or not?" and evaluating that first, you can go and build something that nobody uses, because by the time you're done with it, the process has changed and it can't
Yeah.
be used anymore, right? And you just can't keep up with those kinds of processes. They're too unstable.
Yeah. Well, I see that all the time. Just time, automating a bad process is like the worst idea ever, because it's just you don't see things the same way, and you're just creating extra. You're putting more demands. We find that a lot is that if somebody comes in with a pure business background, doesn't think in terms of any kind of technical structure or systems like that, they're going to put extra demands onto the IT team or whoever's going to be developing that, because they feel like, okay, I should be able to say whatever, and it happens. But when you start to meet in the middle and you have these people who are citizen developers who understand, okay, well, I need to fit what I want inside the system, and I can actually create, oh, it's actually better that way. They'll see those things. They'll make changes on their own. They'll iterate. They're willing to make maybe some slight compromises in what they initially thought was necessary, and now they say, oh well, we don't really need that because I can do this. They think in that way. It really is a mindset shift to be able to start thinking in those types of technical systems.
It is, and that's yeah, I love all that, because that's for me, one of the hidden benefits of citizen development is, right, the people who are solving your problems are the ones who are closest to the problems in many cases. And because these citizen development tools expose them to, let's say, more tech than Excel does, they start to be able to communicate much better with the tech teams than a regular
Yeah,
business user can, right? Like that's always historically, that's one of the big problems, and why so many tech initiatives fail is that, business can't talk to tech and tech can't talk to business. Well, my team, we've become really good translators.
yes,
And it's because we've been doing this for so long. We understand the business, we come from the business, but, but now instead of, going to IT and saying, we need, with a new idea, and we say we need, I don't know, like order data, the inventory, and our supply plans, and I don't know, maybe
yeah,
demand plan, right? Like really vague requirements. We can go to them and say, okay, here are the tables that we need. Here's the filter criteria. Here's the selection criteria. Here's how we're going to model it, right? Because it becomes much more precise, much easier for IT to action. Um, and then once we've built the thing, if we find that it's viable and useful, but maybe we can see kind of like a bigger, broader use case, we can go
yeah,
back to IT and say, here's our prototype. It's working for now. It's a functional prototype, but you should go and build this because everybody wants it. And now, instead of having some vague requirements, they've got a blueprint. It becomes much easier for them to productionalize it.
yeah, absolutely. It becomes a big difference between like, hey, I want a button here versus like, I know what it takes to build that button, and I'm trying to find a different way to do it because that's a bad idea, actually. Yeah. Excellent. Well, Bill, it's been great to hear your experiences, figure out what you're coming from. What's going on with you next? How would you like to close us out to talk to citizen developers out there?
Oh gosh. There's it's it's a really interesting space. And I really just I think I want to talk more to the people who aren't doing it yet, right? To encourage them to step out of their comfort zone. You know, again, I'll give an example. I came across a local manufacturer who's running their S&OP process out of Excel, and they've got like 100+ Excel files with some VBA written on top of it, and they're super proud of it, and rightfully so. But that's a ticking time bomb. And so I encourage anyone who's in a situation like that, or who feels like there's got to be a better way to do things than the way that we're doing it right now. Or maybe it's working right now, but I can see that as we grow and scale, it's gonna, it's bound to fall apart at some point. Like those are the people who should be looking into citizen development and, and just embracing some change and recognizing that it's actually not as hard as it sounds. And these tools are designed for people like you, right? And they're designed not to be that hard to learn.
Yeah. Great way to end it. Thanks so much for being with us, for sharing your knowledge, and for just being a part of this community.
Great chatting with you, Neil. Thanks so much for the opportunity.